Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Loree Kiley, and thank you for joining me. I come to you today from the beautiful foothills of the Sierra Mountains, and I hope you're doing well, and I hope you and your family are safe and social distancing and wearing masks and all those kinds of things, just to be safe out there and taking care of yourself, being mindful of what's going on. We're going to talk today a little bit about taking care of yourself under these circumstances, too. We're going to talk about the new R&R. You remember the old R&R was rest and relaxation, or rest and recuperation. It now stands for resilience and readiness, which are the two sets of coping skills that we need more than anything in this day and age to get through this crazy pandemic and everything else that is all churned up out there. So hopefully today I can give you some tools to help you take better care of yourself. They're free. Don't have to go into therapy. You don't have to buy any distractions or alcohol or anything else. These are free and easy tools that can make an enormous difference in your coping skills and your ability to handle what's going on. I have a really good friend who comes in from South Korea every year, and she talked to me recently about she comes here to the United States, and she said, it just baffles me in this country because people here are all trained either to take care of themselves and not others, or others and not themselves. And she said, that just baffles me. I told her, I'm happy to know somebody who's baffled by that. It's not a zero-sum game. You don't buy one from the other. You can take very good care of yourself and you can take very good care of others. It's not a trade-off. But mostly I want to talk to you about how to take care of yourself today. So let me do a share screen with you, and I'm going to give you a bunch of tools. Pick the ones that work best for you. You don't have to use all of them. Some of them will make sense to you. Some of them will seem silly to you, but they all work. But pick the ones that work best for you. Our title today is How Am I Doing? Taking Care of Yourself During Difficult Times. And this is part of a series of programs that we've produced that are three different contexts. This one is about self-care. We've also produced one about leadership and work. How do you lead and manage people during the COVID or during the social isolation of people working from home and so on? How do you lead and manage in that environment? And then the third program that we have is one about seeding the future. What are we going to do to take care of the future right now, instead of just waiting for it to show up and tell us what it's going to be? So this is the self-care one. And let's talk a little bit then about taking care of yourself. First of all, when you look at these things that are going on, we've been accusing this day and age of being really complex anyway, way before the pandemic. The military calls it a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Lots of things going on. It's a very complex and very intense world, and it moves pretty fast sometimes, and with a lot of surprises as we are living in now. George Carlin, the comedian, said one time, he said, that's actually what he called wuxia day. It's that feeling that creeps over you that you've never been anywhere ever like this before, the opposite of deja vu. I love that sentence. It's like, this definitely, my friends, this pandemic is wuxia day. Most of us have never been in anything ever like this before, which also means we probably don't have great coping skills for it. And that's why I'm here with you today. Let me give you some. I love this quote from Susan Sontag. It's very clever. She says, time exists, in order that everything doesn't happen all at once. And space exists so that it doesn't all happen just to you. What a way of looking at things. Makes my head hurt. But when you think about that, it sort of feels like it's all happening to you, doesn't it? Many of us are having difficulty with that just because it is happening to all of us. We're all handling it differently. Some people are way more intensely impacted by this than others, but we're all impacted by it. And it is personal. And we're all finding out interesting things about ourselves and our coping skills, or lack of them, as we go through this. It's kind of an interesting time in terms of figuring out, how do we navigate this, having never been here before, and how do we navigate it when we weren't really given very good coping skills for situations like this? So let's talk about some of the ways we can do that. Diane Coutu did some work a couple decades ago actually, about resilience. She's done a lot of studies about resilient organizations and resilient people. She came up with three things that she found in resilient organizations and individuals that I think are very relevant today. One of those is that resilient people and organizations have a staunch acceptance of reality. What is real? What is true? Not what is imagined, not what are we afraid of, but a staunch acceptance of reality. You might have noticed that there are various different population groups out there who face it very well, others who don't. Some people are in unbelievable denial about what's going on. So, staunch acceptance of reality. Let's just accept what's real, what is. They also have a deep belief, often buttressed by strongly held values, that life is meaningful. And when you're in a time like this, recognizing that life is meaningful means we probably better find the meaning. And we also have an uncanny ability to improvise. How many of you have been figuring out stuff, making magic happen out of what's available to you? It's really kind of fun to figure out what you can do. These three characteristics hold true for resilient organizations and people because they face reality with staunchness, make meaning of hardship instead of crying out in despair, and improvise solutions from thin air. Other people do not. And Coatue says that those people who are not capable of these three things are not particularly resilient. They're going to have a much harder time. Self-care, then, is one of the main coping skills we have to have. It is not hard, that you have way more control than you think you do, but I'm going to give you some tools so that you can realize that. So this session today that we're going to do on self-care, we're going to talk a little bit about working from home because some people are doing that and they're not used to it. I'll give you some tools for that. We're going to talk about how to control your brain instead of being controlled by it, because any stress or anxiety that you're going through that feels uncomfortable is starting in your brain. And believe it or not, you have control over that. I'll give you some tools. And then what do we do about anxiety and fear? Because underneath almost every single unpleasant emotion that we have is fear. Fear is almost at the base of almost every unpleasant emotion. So what do we do about that? Is there any way we can manage it and cope with it in realistic ways? And I'll give you some tools for that. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how to find your own personal inner strength. It's already there. I'm just going to give you some tools for how to find it. And we're going to give you some tools that actually really work. So let's start here. Working from home virtually. Many people are doing that for the first time. Others have been doing it all along. It's no big deal. But some people are really struggling with what it means to work from home, especially if they've got kids that are being homeschooled. It throws off work-life balance, something terrible. And there's so many things going on, and we're right there by the refrigerator too, which is not necessarily all that great. A lot of people don't know how to work from home virtually. So here are a couple of tools to think about. First of all, if you notice yourself postponing, delaying, or procrastinating work, there might be a series of reasons why. And then we beat up on ourselves because we postpone it, and then we can't make ourselves do it, and then we get caught in this loop, right? Here's some possible reasons. Ask yourself what the reasons might be that you're postponing or delaying or procrastinating. Number one possibility is that you might really be working on it and you don't know you are. Some fantastic research that came out a while back that says people who look like they procrastinate are really only delaying the action of the job, but they're thinking about it up until that point in time. I recognize that I do that. I think about it, and then I act. But I keep thinking I'm a procrastinator. I'm not. I'm actually figuring it out in my head. And by the time I sit down to do it, it's already figured out. So this is nice justification for some of us who think we're procrastinators. Might be just that you're working on it in your head. You might also be afraid that you might not do it right, that you might be concerned about taking this task and not doing it wrong and then getting some kind of negative sanction for it. You also, number three, is you just might not feel like it. And if you don't feel like it, go do something else, distract yourself, and see if you can come back. Many of us realize that it's very hard to make ourselves do something we really don't want to do until we take a break from it. But just sitting there and staring at it, beating up on ourselves, doesn't help. It also might mean that you need help. Is it possible you're delaying or whatever because maybe you need some help? Maybe you're used to working with other people. You can just pop your head over a cubicle and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or any number of things. You may not have the resources that you had at work. It could also be that it's just an unpleasant task and you just really don't want to do it ever. If it's that unpleasant, then get it done. Get it behind you, because wallowing in how unpleasant it is and then beating up on yourself for not doing it just makes it worse and worse and worse. It could also be that you're too isolated and you don't know if anybody cares about the work you're doing or if it even adds up to anything. And I'll give you a tool for that. It could also be that you're an extrovert and you need social interaction so badly that you're starting to talk to yourself and having really happy conversations. Extroverts are having a very hard time with this social isolation. For those of us that are introverts, we're going, oh wow, it's so great, I don't have to go out today. Extroverts are going, oh man, I could really use some company. So we're all different. We all respond to it differently. And aren't we learning about ourselves? So one thing I would suggest if you're feeling that isolation, the uncertainty, you don't know if you're doing it right, all those things, is to ask for feedback from people. Text them, Zoom them, call them, whatever it is, and spend, say, can I have 10 minutes of your time? I'd like some feedback. Feedback is extremely valuable. I consider that all feedback is a gift, even if it isn't true. All feedback is a gift because it makes us think about things. It gives us some choices. So ask for feedback to avoid any surprises. One of the worst things you can do is find out 6 weeks from now that somebody was disappointed in you and they didn't tell you. So ask for feedback so you have that kind of interaction that you would normally be getting from people on a day-to-day basis when you're co-located. Consider any feedback as being in your best interest. It may not even be true, but somebody's paying attention to you, giving you what they think is helpful. Concentrate on listening to the other person, really listening to them. So you have to get your defensiveness out of the way and you have to get your excuses out of the way. Just focus on listening to them. Paraphrase what you hear them say to gain understanding. Ask clarifying questions if necessary. Always thank the person for taking an interest in you and tell him or her how you will use the feedback. Always thank somebody who gives you feedback, even if you don't like it, because at least they took the time. If you want to ask some more questions about the feedback you're getting, I suggest you try some of these possible tools. You can just ask them, can you give me some examples of what you're talking about? I will add here, most people are really terrible at giving feedback. They give it vague or they use words that you don't even know what the definition they're talking about. They don't give you concrete examples. Most people are terrible at it. So if you need clarification, ask them to give you some examples or describe what you're seeing or hearing that leads you to think or to believe something. Or you could also say something like, how do you know that I'm doing this? Or you could say, what would you like to see or hear me do differently? Or you could say, how will you know when I'm doing it the way you like? Or one of my favorites is, what do you think then, based on your feedback, what do you think I should actually start doing? What should I stop doing? And what should I continue doing? That 3 set of questions of start, stop, and continue is one of the best tools you'll ever have. But it'll help people clarify and be more specific with you. If they're not being specific and they're using loaded words and vague words and stuff, use some of these tools and you can get them to be more specific and better understand what they're talking about. So that's the feedback. And Bill Gates said we all need people who give us feedback. That's how we improve. It's also how we confirm what we're doing right and who we are. It's not all feedback is criticism. Sometimes feedback is good and it confirms us rather than asking us to change. All feedback is a gift, so ask for it if you can. So some tips around self-care when you're working at home for the first time and you're doing virtual work. If you're used to this, it's no big deal. Some people got used to it and been doing it and they love it. But here are a few tips for self-care around virtual work. Create a schedule and plan your days. When are your peak energy times? We all have them. Save these for your big projects and challenges. My peak energy times are in the morning. I'm energetic in the morning. I can be creative. Great thinking. My brain is best in the morning. You hit me in the afternoon, I'm not as strong and I'm not as capable in the afternoon. My husband's a musician. He doesn't even wake up till afternoon, so that's his peak time. But just keep in mind, we all have them. Figure out when yours is and use those for your most creative or big projects and challenges. Don't use that time to be opening up email. Email can be done when you're only half there. Email can be done when you're tired. Save that for later, not during your peak time. Don't waste those precious good hours. Determine boundaries also. I had to do this. I'm used to flying all over the world to do my work, and now I'm home, and this is nice. I haven't been home in years for staying in hotels and stuff. But I suddenly realized I didn't have any boundaries, that people were asking me for stuff and I was doing it. I was just jumping all over the place. It was very, very out of control. And I decided I needed to create some boundaries. I need to create some boundaries around when I will take phone calls and when I will answer emails. And with my family, I have to do some boundaries as well, but I determined them and then I communicated them. So figure out what your boundaries are and communicate your plan. It is okay to have boundaries. You don't have to do everything everybody wants you to do all day long, every day. Be careful also, and I mean this very strongly, be careful when and if you watch the news on television or read the news online or whatever. Be very careful about that. The news is not particularly pleasant these days, and it can seriously set you off, and it can tip your brain into thinking bad thoughts and shoot cortisol into your system and all that kind of stuff. Be really careful when you watch the news. I don't recommend that you see it first thing in the morning, and I don't recommend that you see it last thing at night. It will disturb your whole day or your night's sleep. So some people I know are not even watching the news at all because there's nothing new about it. So be very careful what you do with exposing yourself to that. Stay centered and focused. Reflect before you react. Count to 3, take a deep breath before you react. When we're living in intense times like this, it is true that our decision-making powers are not as strong as usual. So sometimes we react a little too soon. We found out that just taking a little pause before people react helps them significantly. They end up with better reactions and nothing that they regret later, having said something or gotten angry or irritable or whatever else. I'm noticing this with a lot of managers today. They're coming to me and said, oh man, I reacted and I shouldn't have, and now I feel bad about that. Now you get a problem with the problem. So reflect before you react. Just take a deep breath. Set an intention for your day. What are you going to get done on that day, and who do you need to be on that day? So today, I need to be a nice person. Today, I need to be a happy person. Tomorrow, I need to be a productive person. But set your intention for the day in the front end. It sets the context that you'll be more likely to stay in. It's funny how that works, but it really does. Write a realistic checklist. How many of you've got a checklist now that's 6 pages long because you're thinking about all the things you should accomplish during all this time that you're at home? Make it realistic. All that does is make you feel out of control if you've got a really long checklist. And build in rituals, especially how you start your day. Start it with a cup of coffee and walking around outside Mother Nature, or start it with a meditation, or start it with breakfast, or whatever that is good for you. Build in rituals on especially how you start the day, because it sets your brain in motion for how you're going to be the rest of the day. How you start has a lot to do with how the rest of the day goes. Choose your best spot in your house if you're working from home. Choose the spot where you can avoid distractions. I was teaching a class to a bunch of managers last week, and one of the managers had her little kids were crawling all over her, and she was trying to talk to us and try to do her homework, and all that. These kids were just crawling all over her like she was a jungle gym. It was really cute. But if you got some boundaries where you can keep that from happening and go someplace where you can avoid distractions, it'll keep you more focused, especially if you're having to work. Go to the spot also where you feel the most energy. We all have power spots. Find the power spot in your home for you, where you feel the most energy, and have good lighting and natural lighting if you can. It's very helpful for keeping the energy level not only high, but also positive. Also stay connected to the people at work, largely so that you're not out of sight, out of mind. They did some interesting studies of people who are expats working for their company, but working overseas, and found out that if they didn't touch base very regularly, people forgot they even existed. And our jobs cannot afford to be out of sight, out of mind. So connect with people, solicit feedback, schedule a happy hour with your colleagues. You could all just have your own wine or your own beer and your own snacks and just enjoy it together, just as if you're together having your typical happy hour. And don't talk about work. Connect with them and keep your relationships happy and healthy. And give people appreciation. If anybody does anything that you're happy about it, that you appreciate, please tell them. It'll make you feel better, makes them feel better. Very powerful stuff. If there's anything anybody does, please let them know. And then also, really importantly, we all know, is get out of the chair, get up, get away from work, walk outside to get a dose of nature or fresh air. Pay attention to the sensory experience outside. Just turn your brain into thinking about all the five senses. You know, I live here in the foothills of the Sierras, and so the smells are incredible. It's pine trees and stuff like that, and the sounds. You can hear the wind through these really tall redwood trees, and it reminds me of when I was camping as a little kid. What are the tastes? We've got plums growing on our trees right now, but they're tastes and the sounds. Listen to the birds and the sights. Just tune into the sensory experience. It actually tricks your brain into going to a healthier place than obsessing about stuff or thinking about, oh, all the things you have to get done. Do something nice for yourself. So those are some tips for self-care around if you're working virtually for the first time. Try them, they work. You can solve just about anything, but you have to do it. It just takes a little discipline and it takes a little practice. Next piece I want to cover, though, is who's in control here, me or my brain? I'll give you a little hint about the way the brain works. And it's not in your favor exactly. And it does sound sort of funny when I talk about me or my brain as if they're two different entities, but they are. Your brain will take off without you, and it does not go to pleasant places. Here's how it works. Incoming information into the brain is a heat-seeking missile. It seeks feelings. It's going to check to see how this feels, this incoming information. And when it goes to feelings, then you're also only using the most primitive part of your brain and the amygdala part of your brain, which is the part that was there with cavemen. We've developed more parts of our brain since then. But it goes to feelings, and as it goes to feelings, it associates and it compares. It associates with other things that might have felt like this, and then it compares it to other things that might have felt like this, which means it's always going to the past. It makes sense out of right now and today by going to the past to make sense, which tells you right away that's not particularly rational, it's not particularly helpful. The brain also ignores some information. I mean, we can't pay attention to everything because, quite frankly, there's too much stimuli. So it ignores some information. But wait, it also invents, it makes some stuff up. Just love that. It just makes stuff up. It's not even true or real or anything else, but we just make stuff up. And it uses the five senses. You probably know this, but watch the memory going to the past, ignoring some information, and so on and so forth. The sensory apparatus in our brain that is most closely tied to memory, all five of them are, but the one that's most closely tied to memory is smell, right? So smell, you smell grass and you think of yourself when you were a 12-year-old and you were mowing the grass, or you smell pine trees and you think of Christmas, you smell candles, you think of Hanukkah. For me, it's English leather cologne, and I'm not going to tell you what it makes me think of, but it takes me right back there. So think about all of these things are just the way your synapses are firing. It's completely arbitrary based on your own experience. It's called what we call ape reasoning, accidental proximity of events. Creates our reality, and then we live through that reality for everything we go through for the rest of our lives. We actually don't have to do it that way, but we have to use different parts of our brains to be here now and experience the real experience we're going through. In fact, Daniel Kahneman wrote a wonderful book called Thinking Fast and Slow. He won one of the international prizes for this incredible piece of work. It's very, very dense and thick, so you can get the abbreviated version. But Kahneman makes this incredible quote to what I was just talking about. He says, odd as it may seem, I am my remembering self. And the part of me that is actually experiencing stuff right now, the part of me that does my actual living, is like a stranger to me, because we make sense out of everything we're going through from where we've been before. But that's the primitive part of our brain. We don't have to do it that way. Here's why it occurs. Here's why it's so strong. It was the first part of human brains. From the way back in studying sapiens, you start to realize that, in fact, the primitive part of our brain, incoming information would come in and it would look for threat, right? Sort of like this little guy over here on the right. That's a saber-toothed tiger. We had that part of our brain. It was very, very strong because it was a survival part. We used it more than anything else as cavemen, because we were always worried about running into one of these saber-toothed tigers and I have to say, is it scary? Is it dangerous? How dangerous is it? What should I do about it? That's why we built that mechanism into our brain. If we have no mental discipline, if we have not made our brains our friend, then that threat becomes fear. And when we feel fear, we have only three choices: fight, flight, or freeze. Fight is when you feel angry or irritated. Flight is when you think, just get me out of this, just get me out of this. And freeze is when you're bouncing off the wall saying, what do I do now? Wish somebody tell me what to do now. What do I do now? We all have a default to fear. Mine happens to be fight. When I get scared, I get mad. And I dig in and I try to figure out how to solve it right away. Not always as reasonably as I should, but that's my default. Others have the fight response. You've seen them. They just disappear. Whether they're still in the room or not, they have just disappeared. And then there's the freeze, where they're just stuck and hoping somebody else will tell them what to do. Those are the only options we've got when incoming information attacks our fear base. All because we're afraid of saber-toothed tigers. When was the last time you saw a saber-toothed tiger? We don't need to still be afraid of them. There's another part of our brain we can use, which is called the prefrontal cortex. It's the very front lobe of the brain, and that's the executive function. The problem is, if the fear kicks in and the primitive part of our brain takes over, our executive function is stuck at the door. We have to invite the executive function into the room, into the party, in order to use it, because it won't just crash the party. The party will take off without it. So how do we do that? Well, let's look at this prefrontal cortex. It's that red part in that picture that you see there. It's the newest part of the Homo sapiens brain in terms of evolution. This has occurred over our evolution as humans. And it's really an interesting part of the brain. It wasn't there for cavemen. What is housed here, first of all, is long-term planning, understanding, rules, calculating risk and reward, regulating emotions, problem solving, good decision making. That's why it's called the executive function. It also uses more parts of the brain than just the left or the right or the scary part. But around reducing anxiety, it's critical to bring that part of our brain in, because during chaotic times, when we're feeling overwhelmed or we're feeling out of control, unless we invite it in, we won't have access to it. And during times of distress, people make poor decisions, and that exaggerates the anxiety then, and then leads to more bad decisions, and the whole thing snowballs into downward spiral. You'll be watching people do this. As you think about the people that you're interacting with, are you noticing that you just scratched the surface a little bit, and the emotions are very raw and they're very close to the surface right now, everywhere. So when people react quickly and they don't pause, they'll do something they regret, then they feel bad about themselves, they don't like themselves, and then they're mad at themselves. Now they've got another problem, and then they obsess even more, and the whole thing spirals out of control. And you can pull it back, but it's much better caught early so that we prevent that downward spiral. Anxiety impacts are really very strong. Anxiety is really bad for our body. Stress is really bad for our body. A little bit of it's okay because it pushes us, but when it becomes distress, it's bad. It creates deficits in emotional regulation, regulating our emotions. You'll see people getting angry that they can't control and maybe getting out of control with it. It impacts our cognitive flexibility. It creates a kind of rigidity in our brain. And it also significantly affects our control over our behaviors. And we don't need to have any more of that. We need to have the coping skills that help us control these kinds of things appropriately. Problem being, of course, that the high levels of the stress hormone cortisol kick in, and we flood with this cortisol, and it's bad stuff. It disrupts brain structure and functional connectivity of the prefrontal cortex. In fact, you can't even access it if you got too much cortisol in there, so bad stuff. So what do we do about this then? Right, so now you know where it's coming from. The interesting thing is you have way more control over that brain than you think you do. So one of the ways is to take a look at, how do we conquer fear then? How can we actually fight back with fear instead of letting it control us? Pema Chodron wrote a book a while back. She's a Tibetan nun, actually, and she wrote a book called When Things Fall Apart, Heartfelt Advice for Hard Times. If you like that and this resonates with you, it's a wonderful book to read. But she says, You know, nobody ever tells us to stop running away from fear. Nobody tells us to stop running away. The advice we usually get is sweeten it up, smooth it over, take a pill, distract ourselves, but by all means, make it go away. You can't make fear go away. Trying to make fear go away actually feeds it. It makes it grow, because denying it and not facing it gives it fuel. I mean it, we can even measure that in your brain. So George Adair said something very profound. If you ever think about everything you ever wanted, everything you ever wanted is on the other side of fear. If you can face down fear and figure out how to manage it and cope with it and make yourself a better person because of it, you'll have everything you ever wanted, because the main barrier is fear. So I promised you today I would bring you some tools for controlling our brains so they don't take off without us. I have several. Pick the ones that work for you, throw the rest away. So some of them are very rational, some of them are a little out there. They all work. Pick the ones that feel more authentic to you and don't feel too goofy. Here's tool number 1. Build your mental muscle. Stimulate that prefrontal cortex so that you can reduce the fear signaling and the anxiety. You can really do that. So here's how you stimulate it. You distract the amygdala part of the brain, the primitive part of the brain, distract it by using this part in the front, by doing things like thinking in terms of optimism. You should read the studies on optimism. Optimists live longer and they live happier. Who wouldn't want that? So practice a little optimism, as hard as it might be. Get enough sleep and have a sleep routine. You must have 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. Stay away from the things that trigger your fear. And for sure, stay away from drama. Don't create it and don't get caught up in it. It is bad, it is unhealthy, it damages relationships, and it makes our brains go out of control. Get up and move. That also helps. Learn or practice whole brain activities like music, art, sports, dance, athletics. I mean, you name it. Anything that uses the whole brain is using the prefrontal cortex as well, and it shoots you full of much better chemicals than cortisol. I think the cheapest and most effective one of all is gratitude. Think about what you're happy about. Think about what you're grateful for. There are big things and little things. I'm grateful for all kinds of stuff, but think about what you're grateful for and make a list every day. First thing in the morning, set your intentions, set your day by writing down what you're grateful for. It fires the synapses in your brain in different ways, fills you with different kinds of chemicals that are much healthier for you. Try it. It's free. It's so cool. Physical contact with pets and loved ones, obviously where you're safe, and social distancing when necessary, but physical contact is important. We have known since studies done way back in World War II that people and children and babies and pets and so on need tactile interaction. The taking touch away from human beings actually is very, very damaging to them. Play challenging mental games, right? That's a pretty cool one. Use your imagination. Oh, and also use the social connections and helping others do things. It's also very helpful for, building that mental muscle. So speaking of relationships, here's tool number 2. The social indicators of health in this country are really fascinating. 1, it's a roof over your head. Number 2 is a group or a community that you belong to, that cares about you and that you care about. That is a social indicator of health, not just mental health, but physical health. Without that, you are very likely not to be healthy. So social distancing does not mean social disconnecting. At the end of the day, Simon Sinek says, humans are social animals, and we are at our best when we get to do things with others who appreciate and enjoy what we enjoy. It's what keeps us human. So keep that in mind. Don't deny that of yourself, and it's not something that's bad for you, and it's not something that you think is frivolous and, oh gosh, I shouldn't do that because I've got so much work to do. This is how you take care of yourself too. You can also slow down, reconnect, tell people who have influenced you. Create a mastermind group. I've got a wonderful mastermind group of my peers, and we get together once a month and we just think about the big questions. The latest one we're thinking about is, what is the tendency of humankind? That's a really interesting question. And we discuss these things. Communities of promise are a neat next step after a mastermind group. These are people who come together to talk about the big issues and the big questions and decide to do something about them and implement something. This is a very neat thing to do. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it really uses your brain in much more effective and progressive and positive ways. Keep the greater good in mind. Look to the heroes. Think about who your heroes are. Who are your heroes? People you knew, people that lived once upon a time, people you read about. Doesn't matter, but think about your heroes. Please don't compare yourself to them. It's not a contest. Just think about what makes them heroic. It actually makes you feel better. Stay calm and focused, show gratitude, and remember our common humanity and show compassion. Those are all pretty much free. One of my favorites right now is this little template. You can pause after this if you'd like to, pause the recording and try this because it's a very valuable thing to do. List 3 people who had a profound effect on you in life. Maybe you haven't been in touch with them for 20 or 30 years. Find them. You can almost find anybody these days. Find them, reach out to them, thank them, and tell them how they influenced you. You have no idea what that will do for somebody's day, and you have no idea what it's going to do for you. It's very powerful. Shoots you full of good chemistry from your own natural systems. Really good stuff. I'm hearing from students I taught 20 and 30 years ago recently, so I think a lot of people are doing this, and it's kind of a nice thing that's coming from this crazy social isolation. Tool number 3, focus on things that you can find interesting or inspiring or things that tickle you. So here's some examples. Anything that you find inspiring, anything you find interesting, just find some stuff. The things that just please you and you find tickling, right? Like, for example, we've got this. Mumbai actually can see the mountains for the first time in 60 years because they've stopped the manufacturing and the smog is all gone. I find that very inspiring. I'm very happy about that. Gosh, isn't that interesting what Mother Nature does? This tickles me. I don't know if you've been tracking, but with these towns and communities, I'm even seeing it here in the foothills, the people aren't out, so the animals are coming out. And this in particular in Wales, the wild goats are coming out. This is downtown, and they're wandering around in goat herds, just looking like, where are all the folks? Look at that cute guy. That tickles me. It also tickles me because the jackals took over in Tel Aviv. I don't know if you've seen this. When's the last time you saw a jackal? This is a park right in downtown Tel Aviv, but there are no people out. So the wild animals are coming closer and closer in to look around and explore. So that tells you why they've been absent. They don't want to be around people. But look at these. That's a whole pack of jackals, for heaven's sake. That tickles me. Tool number 4 is nature nurtures. Remember that. Unbelievable. You're having a bad day, a bad moment, anything. Get up, go outside, and get into nature. She is an incredible strength and very, very willing to share her strength with you. I love John Muir's quote about when one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. Very true. Like this. Take a 20-minute nature pill. Recent study just found out that a 20-minute nature pill or a nature experience was enough to significantly reduce cortisol levels. And that's what you need in order to get control over your stresses. Get that cortisol out of your system. Drink lots of water too. And it says if you spent more than a little more time immersed in nature, 20 or 30 minutes sitting or walking, cortisol levels drop at their greatest rate. That's all you have to do is just go out and experience Mother Nature for a little while, and all that really toxic chemistry gets out of you. Here's another one I like, earthing. Remember when we were kids and we'd go out and make those snow angels and how good that felt to just be laying in that snow and making those snow angels? It felt so good if you grew up around snow. Do the same thing in the grass. Find a place where you're not going to get bitten by bugs. But look at these people just wallowing in the grass. If you lay in it for just a little while and you start feeling it, you'll feel Mother Nature's energy coming into you. Mother Nature has a lot of vibration and a lot of natural energy. This is scientific. And if you just lie down like this on top of her and think about it, you can feel the energy rising into your body and giving you some of her strength because she's more than willing to share it with you. Earthing is a very fun thing to do. Just watch out for the bugs. And then there are trees. Trees are my favorite. My dad was a forester, so I'm crazy about trees. I don't think there's anything more wonderful on earth than trees. and they're strong and they're solid, and they actually interact with each other too, to a certain degree. Trees are powerful. If you ever want to feel something good, just go out and be around trees. In fact, here's one of my favorite quotes by Tennessee Williams, who said, "Oh, courage, could you not as well select a second place to dwell, not only in that golden tree, but in the frightened heart of me." Touch a tree. If this doesn't feel too goofy to you, put your hands on a tree trunk and just feel the electricity, the energy, the vibration from that tree trunk coming into your hands. Those trees will share their energy with you, very positive energy. You won't hurt them. They have lots of it to share, and they're more than willing to share it with you. Put your hands on a tree and just feel the energy coming into them. If that doesn't feel too goofy to you. I mean, it doesn't feel really too goofy to you, put your arms around it. It's very cool. Feel that energy coming into your chest. Trees are marvelous, marvelous miracles. Tool number 5 is just realism. Let's be realistic, right? Here's a tool. You can do this if you want to. You can pause the recording and do this if you'd like. But the tool is just figure out what can you control and what can you not control. You know the Serenity Prayer. Incredible tool to think about, where do I have control, where do I not have control? Because a lot of our fear is based on thinking like we have no control whatsoever. I can't control this. Of course, there's some things you can't control. There are also some things you can. I would suggest to you the number one thing you can control is how you're thinking about it. But make a list of all of your concerns. What are all the things that are concerning you right now? And then by those, you can figure out which ones do you have control over. You'd be surprised. Which ones do you have no control over? And what can you do with what you can control? And think carefully about what you believe to be true. So here's actually a little worksheet you can use if you want to pause for a couple of minutes here and think about this. What are all the things that you're concerned about right now? All of them, big and small. What do you have control over? What do you not have control over? What do you have some control over? And what can you do about that concern with whatever control you have? I think you'll start to see that you have more control than you think. It also tells you which ones not to worry about too much because you can't control them anyway. Don't worry about the stuff you can't control. I'll show you a tool for that in just a second. Thought stopping, tool number 6, is my favorite. It's free, it's unbelievably powerful, and it doesn't take a therapist. If you notice that you are thinking thoughts, obsessive thoughts, or feeling high levels of anxiety and you're mulling around stuff in your brain and you can't stop that, and most of us can get into obsessive thinking, all you have to do is do what's called thought stopping. This comes from cognitive-based therapy. These tools are unbelievable, and you don't have to pay anything for them. You don't have to go to a therapist. Think about something that calms you and gives you peace or gives you joy. For me, it's trees, right? It should only be 1 or 2 words. And when you find yourself thinking obsessively, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, or I've got to do this, I've got to do this, whatever the obsessive thought is that you can't stop, say that word or those 2 words 7 times. So if I get caught in this mental loop, I say tree, 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 tree. If that doesn't stop the thought, then I do it again 7 times. The magic is in the 7 times. And I don't know why, but they've measured this over and over again. It causes your synapses to fire differently. That obsessive thought is your synapse, incoming information has created a loop in your brain, and it's firing the same synapse over and over and over again. This tool breaks the synapse, stops it cold, and distracts the original incoming information to go fire a synapse in a totally different direction. This is called neuroplasticity, and it is magic because your brain is way more flexible than you think it is, but you have to take control over it. I just did this course for legislative staffers in Washington, D.C. who are under major amounts of stress. These are the people, the nonpartisan people who work there as staffers. And I gave it this one guy, and he said, I'm just obsessing about this one problem I've got, and I can't get out of it, and I can't break. You know what a loop is. And just, there's no point in it because it just keeps looping back around. The way to stop a loop in a computer is to hit Control Alt Delete, reboot, right? This is a way to reboot a loop in your brain. So I gave him this, and it was so funny because he said, "Oh, come on, really?" And I said, "Well, just try it. Just do me a favor, try it for the next couple of days." He called me 2 days later and he said, "I can't believe it. It works every time. It really does. It's free and you can do it. But it takes discipline and it takes practice." One of my buddies uses the word taco. He just loves tacos. So when he gets stuck in an obsessive loop, he goes, taco, 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 taco. It's unbelievable. Try it. In fact, if you reach out to me, my email address is later in these slides. And if it works for you, I want to hear from you. Just try it. Can't hurt. Nobody will know you're doing it. And then there's worry. We talked about that a minute ago. Let me tell you something about worry. Ram Dass, the spiritualist and wild man who died probably about a year ago, within the last year or so, wrote an incredible book called Be Here Now. Just think about the title of that. Or think about what Kahneman said, "My experiencing self is a complete stranger to me." How about if we start experiencing the moment that we're in? Like right now. This moment is really good here. I'm sitting here talking to you wonderful folks, using the PowerPoint slides. I got a glass of water. I got everything I need. I've got some pretty flowers behind me. This is a really nice moment. How about if I'm actually in it so that I'm not a stranger to my living experience? If the present moment is good, then worry will destroy it. Worry never changes the outcome. Planning does, preparedness does, being ready for it does, but worry doesn't. So it doesn't change what's going to happen. So here's what you do. If there's something you're worried about, prepare what you will do if your worry actually happens, and then let it go until it's time to act. And then enjoy the rest of these precious moments that you have that are actually good. You can do that too. It's a form of thought stopping, and it works. Worry doesn't help anything. So that's tool number 7. Refreshing a couple of things. Here's 6 self-care strategies that can help you avoid burnout. Create better balance in your daily routines. Set boundaries for yourself and others. Practice awareness and know your triggers. Have the courage to say no. Use the no sandwich. This is something that they invented at the Harvard negotiation project that I just love. It's yes, no, yes. Somebody asks you something, you don't know how to say no, you use the no sandwich. You say, yes, I understand what you need. No, I'm not going to be the one who helps you with that. But yes, I will help you find someone who can, or help you find a way to find some answers. That's very nice. You're being relational with them, and you're also learning to say no, and you're creating your own boundaries. Also assess your values. Set your intentions every day. In other words, find ways to stay true to who you are. And then find your power in being authentic and vulnerable. Be who you are. You're pretty cool just the way you are. One of the best ways to learn self-care starts with self-acceptance. So I did also mention we're going to talk a little bit about finding that inner strength. It starts with self-acceptance. Everyone has inner strength. Everyone does. And so Chris Carr says there's no need to wait for the bad things to be over. Change now, love now, and live now. Don't wait for people to give you permission to live, because they won't. They're struggling with the same things you are. That's the freeze kind of model of, can somebody just tell me what to do? You can figure this out. Nelson Mandela, who was in prison in isolation in Africa for many, many years because of his political views. This is a hero you need to study. This man lived in isolation for years and years and years. And he figured out how to manage his brain so that he not only made this experience tolerable to him, he turned it into a positive experience as much as he could, but he also has helped millions of other people since. One of the things he said is, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid. The brave man is he who conquers that fear. We all have the ability to do this, but we need to learn how. And your internal strength, it's not what you think it is in some cases. Finding it, let me point out to you, it's not what you think it is. It's there, but you may need to intentionally invite it to the party. But it is there. You've experienced it sometimes in your life. What it's not is, it's not denial. It's not pretending like there isn't a problem, or it's not suppressing or putting a lid on everything, or it's not girding your loins and being brave and strong. It's not any of that. It also doesn't act with bluster and bravado. It's none of that. You'll know it when you feel it. It's calm, it's gentle, it is strong. It doesn't feel foreign to you. It feels solid, humble, calm, strong, and like an old friend has been waiting for you to reconnect and call upon it when you need it. It is there. Get a little more acquainted with it. Make friends with it. Call upon it to serve you when you need it. That's why it exists, is to serve you. So one of the ways you can figure this out, and you may want to pause again the recording and think about this. Think about some times in your life. Go all the way back to when you were a little kid, when your inner strength showed up and surprised you. There are times I can remember in my own life that something happened or something I thought, wow, I'm not going to be able to handle this. This is awful. And suddenly my inner strength showed up and I was surprised to see it. I was thankful to see it. I was thankful that it existed. And I was surprised. And I can remember thinking, wow, I'm stronger than I thought I was. And write this list down. Doesn't matter if you're a little kid and somebody picked on you and you stood up to them. Or you climbed a tree for the first time when you were scared. I mean, any of those kinds of things. I remember one time I was horribly introverted and I was about 5 years old, and my grandparents were in the hospital, and my folks took me to the hospital with them. They went to see my grandparents and left me in the lobby by myself. And I was a horrible introvert, terrified. And some little brave girl walked up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Mary. What's your name?" And I remember thinking, oh, I wish I could just disappear. I don't know what to do here. Oh my God, I'm scared and I'm 5 years old. I'm sitting here by myself. And I looked up at her. I said, "Hi, my name's Laurie." And I thought, where did that come from? Our inner strength shows up at odd times. It surprises us, but it's there. So put your list somewhere that you can see it at all times, so you know that it's there and you can call on it when you need it. And one of the ways that we know it, is sometimes you never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have. We've all been there. Even if you're a little kid and it was not a big deal, being strong might have been the only choice you had. So try to remember when it was and how you found it, and write a list so you can see it, and invite it to the party. Another man who spent many, many years in isolation in a concentration camp is Viktor Frankl. If you're looking for something powerful to read right now, read his book called Man's Search for Meaning. And all this time, when he thought he was going to be killed almost every solitary day when he was in the concentration camp, he managed to figure out how to control his brain in positive ways to tolerate the situation, because it's the only choice he had. And he also wrote this book that thousands, millions of people have read this book and been helped by it. Read it. It's very, very powerful. He's one of the heroes. But he said, as he was describing the experience that he went through, he said, it's realism with optimism. The combination is very powerful. A human being is not one thing among others. Things determine each other, but man is ultimately self-determining. In other words, who we turn out is largely up to us. What man becomes within the limits of endowment and environment, he's made out of himself. And in the concentration camps, for example, in the living laboratory and on this testing ground that he lived in, and we watched and witnessed some of our comrades behave like swine while others behave like saints. Man has both potentialities within himself, and which one is actualized depends entirely on the decisions that we make, and not on the conditions that we're in. And this is a man who lived it to prove it. So find your inner strength. Here's another way to look at it. My favorite quote in the world from Mark Twain. The two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you found out why. Have you had that second day yet? Have you found out why you were born? Maybe you're just born to be here. Maybe it's no big deal, right? Or maybe you're born to make a contribution, or maybe you're born for a purpose or whatever. Ask yourself that question. It's a very exciting exploration. Find out what's the second day, the day you found out why you were born. Very powerful stuff. It also fills you through different chemicals that are good for you and not bad for you. So one of the things I did in all this process is I wanted to grow a little garden. I finally got off the road. I travel for a living, so I got off of airplanes and I'm home for the first time in 30 years. I'm home sleeping in my own bed every night. And I wanted to grow a little garden because I didn't want to have to keep going to the grocery store. That was too scary. But I wanted fresh herbs, and you can't keep them fresh for very long. So I went to this wonderful place I found online called Spade to Fork. It's a small little company, husband and wife, who, by the way, have no doubt figured out the second day they know why they were born. It came with a quote that inspired me. I'm going to share with you in a second, but especially what's going on in the world right now. But look at this cute little kit, the little seeds in the little boxes, the little planters that came with it. That's actually dirt. You add water to the dirt and it expands, and then you plant the seeds. It's awesome. I love it. I love this company. And there are my seeds growing with thyme and cilantro and some parsley. Here they are a few weeks later. Look at how exciting that is. I'm just sharing that with you because it has to do with setting your intentions. The quote that came with this growing garden came from Audrey Hepburn, interestingly enough. The quote is, "To plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow." Wow, that's both literally and figuratively true. Obviously, if you're going to plant a garden, you're going to plant some seeds. You think they're going to turn into something. So I like this right now. Right now, we're stuck in that place that Nancy Levin calls in between the no longer and the not yet. So one of the ways to really take better care of ourselves is to quit worrying about the no longer and start worrying about the not yet. So my question to you is, what seed will you plant this week? What intention do you want to plant this week because you believe in tomorrow and you think it will grow into something valuable? And this is the seed I want to plant for you, and that's about keeping perspective. This is the seed I want to plant for you. It's a quote from Tara Brach, who's a Buddhist psychologist, an interesting combination, actually. Does beautiful work with fear and all kinds of self-love and things like that. If you are of that mindset, she's a wonderful person to check out and got tools like you wouldn't believe. But she said just about a month or two ago, she said, "May we remember now to be deeply kind. We are all living with uncertainty, fear, and loss, and everyone you meet is struggling hard. We are all affected by this. And may we remember to celebrate the good, savoring the beauty of spring or now the summer. The care in each other's hearts, the joy that comes from real tender-hearted connection during such vulnerable times." That's the seed I want to plant for you. And I want to end this by saying thank you so much. This is how you can reach us if you need us. You can get copies of the slides if you'd like. info@WeWillInc, WeWillinc.com. Reach out to us and let us know if it helped. Let us know if the thought stopping worked. Let us know if you want copies of the slides. So I'll stop sharing and just say to you, thank you so much for your time. I hope you pick 1 or 2 or 3 things out of what we talked about today that will make your life better and easier, and introduce some serious self-care into your world. It's okay to take care of yourself. And it's also okay to take care of others. It's not a zero-sum game. Take care of yourself, your family, the people that you love. Be safe and sane out there. Practice social distancing, wear masks, deal with the reality with optimism, and let us know how we can help. Thank you so much for your time. Be well, be safe, be sane. Bye.